And hello, this is Eamonn O'Brien. You're very welcome to the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And today we're going to talk about the power of motivation and what it takes to get people excited about goals and about visions. And we have a fantastic expert in our experts chair today to talk about that. It is Jerry Duffy. Jerry. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Eamonn. Thank you for the invite.
And for people who don't know who Jerry is, well, Jerry, of course, is a very well known in athletic circles for being a fellow who's managed to run 32 marathons in 32 days. I know, it's exhausting. And if you think that's difficult, he also won in 2011 the Deca Iron Triathlon competition, which I guess is the toughest endurance race in the world, Jerry.
So to say, it's been dubbed, I think, the toughest 10-day endurance challenge.
It is, but you're a fellow who knows about motivation and getting out of bed to get things done. So I want to talk, if I can, about when leaders are really trying to get people excited about notions, about goals, and about ideas. Tell me a little bit about the whole notion of goal setting. What's involved?
Goal setting, it's an incredibly simple thing, but it's incredibly complex. But the principles of how to achieve goals, Eamonn, I believe, are very, very simple. And a phrase I use a lot in the presentations I do is, you know, it's simple, isn't it? And people agree, but then I follow it up by saying it's not easy. And so as an example of that, one thing I routinely ask audiences, how many of you write your goals down? And usually the stats would be 1%. I said, but do you agree that you're more likely to achieve them if you do? And they all agree. And then I said, well, why don't you write them down? You see, it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. With goal setting, I think the most important thing in relation to goal setting, and we do it, but we do it to a standard. And I think we need to improve the standard of our thinking. And it's amazing how, so for example, a business owner will just routinely, year after year, just go and live in the business, but never actually stand back and think about, well, what am I doing in there? What's my goal? You know, why is it just to grow a business? And that's the way a lot of businesses are, just to grow the business. But by being so non-specific, we potentially are falling way short of our potential. Yeah. So another element of goal setting is to specifically define the goal. So I want to achieve 8% growth in the first 3 months of the year. And there's an extra thing, goals must have deadlines. And usually people don't put deadlines on their goals.
They don't, and that's a really interesting thing, because what you're saying, it matters both in business and also in a personal capacity. And maybe if we can dig a little bit into kind of your background and how you got involved in this might kind of provoke a little conversation. Obviously, you have managed to achieve a great deal in all of these endurance areas and also in the growth of your speaking business, but where did you start, and what, you know, to learn what you have now realized and to be able to share that with others? Tell me a little bit about the kind of journey you went on.
Yeah, I guess it's a very simple journey, really. I started running at 27. Like a lot of people, I took up exercise to lose weight because I'd put on 4.5 stone.
Oh.
I was also...
I couldn't imagine that, but okay.
Yeah, and so I was just under 17 stone, having been 12 stone. So I'm back to 12 stone now, but I was also a heavy smoker. And I had a photograph taken with my sporting hero, a man called Seve Ballesteros, the Spanish golfer. And I recognized him in the photograph, but I didn't recognize myself. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I learned a very good principle of goal setting is to have a vision of what you want to achieve, but the value of maybe having a photograph. I kept the photograph. I was about to tear it up and I said, no, you're going to use this photograph as a motivation to make change in your life. And 20 years later, I still have the original photograph. And I kept the photograph as a motivation to try and lose the weight, to try and give up cigarettes. And as a result of a strategy I employed was I took up running. I got up to 3 miles, and then I just stretched a little bit further to 4 miles. So I was learning some principles about goal setting, about if you're prepared to stretch, you can achieve a little bit more maybe than you thought. But also critically, Eamonn, I started to get happier. And I realized that higher levels of happiness only come when we get out of a comfort zone.
Yes.
So I started to apply this principle. I said, gosh, I knew I'd unfinished business with education. I knew I'd unfinished business in terms of my career, that I was in a job that didn't overly stimulate me. And I realised, well, gosh, maybe if you're willing to stretch, so maybe to upskill yourself, maybe to go back to college to challenge yourself academically, maybe to challenge yourself to go and identify a business that you might want to do yourself, all of which was out of a comfort zone. But I was now up to 10 and 12 miles of running, so I started to apply the same principles. And then something interesting happened in 1999. For the first time in my life, I was 31, I wrote a goal down on a sheet of paper, something I dreamt about for 20 years. And that was the extra nugget that made me realise the goal within 6 months, something I dreamt about for 20 years.
Which is hugely important. And I suppose maybe we can translate that a little bit, because for people who are in leadership roles, and they may indeed write down their goals, they might indeed be passionate about it, but of course they want to influence others to be equally excited about that. Talk a little bit, if you would, about sharing vision and how people can, if you like, influence others to get as excited about ideas.
Well, I remember just in the last couple of years, I remember hearing somebody speak to a team, and he spoke about the vision. And I remember thinking, but that's your vision. You know,
exactly.
You don't go on the pitch. They're the people that go on the pitch. And what I see is communication being a big challenge for leaders, because communication is going on anyway. So unless you involve the followers in the communication and allow them a voice, if they have a voice, they have a share in the vision, and also by allowing them a voice, it's showing respect, but also it's intrinsically now involving them in it. And you've got their buy-in, because now they've bought into the vision, they're far more likely to go with you on the journey.
Oh, that's for certain, yeah. But of course, you know, the way to hell is paved with good intentions, and various stumbling blocks that tend to emerge. When it comes to things that really obstruct us getting people excited about things and derail all of the wonderful progress that's been made, what are the biggest mistakes that you see most commonly, and how can people kind of get past that, I suppose?
Sure, great question. And I might have probably 100 answers to that question, but one or two that might jump out is sometimes we take on unrealistic goals, and that were never realistic in the first place.
Yes.
And I learned that when I came up with the idea for the 32 marathons, and I learned a critical value there. I didn't tell anybody for a year because it wasn't realistic. I knew people wouldn't take me seriously, because I said, Jerry, you're here, and if you want to run a marathon every day for 32 days, that's here. That's too big of a stretch. So for 1 year, I stretched myself to get to here. But I was prepared to do that, Eamonn. Whereas a lot of people will just try and jump straight up to there, and then they fall, not just back there, but then they fall even further. A typical example would be somebody that's trying to lose weight.
Oh, that's a great example, yeah.
Yeah. So also the most powerful question I believe we should ask in relation to any goal is not what do I want to achieve, not how am I going to achieve it, why do I want to achieve it? Yes, of course, you need to figure out what you want to achieve.
Why is critically important, actually.
So
and I remember I had a hugely interesting conversation with a fellow who is a specialist in personal training. And I said, so tell me, do you know when people come into you who will succeed and who won't? He said, absolutely. And I said, why? And he said, the most motivated people are actually women and, lesser extent, men getting ready for a wedding, because they have an absolute why. Yes. So I think that's critically important. But in terms of, if you like, sharing the why, now therein, does that create difficulties? Can that be a bit of a challenge for leaders who, you know, that's your why? Because you talked about that a little earlier on. Well, the involvement.
Again, it goes back to communication, and I think involving people. And I think that the best style of leadership, although it's not always the appropriate style of leadership, but if you have the time, is a coaching style of leadership. But
yes.
There's many different kinds of leadership. You know, sometimes it needs to be authoritative. You know, it needs to be quick. It needs to be pace setting.
Yes.
But if you have the time, you know, Alec Ferguson being a good example, he was afforded time at the beginning of his tenure in Man United, and as a consequence, he was able to coach rather than tell. And over time, he just built this incredible and left an amazing legacy. But I do think ultimately involving people, if you want longevity in terms of performance, people have to be involved. People have to feel appreciated. People want value, I think, fulfillment over and above financial remuneration.
No, I think that's exactly right. And what would you say to people who would think, you know, we just have stuff that needs to get done. You know, why can't I just tell you to do it and expect you to do it? You know, the AKA, the parental, because I said so type of thinking. Isn't that all a bit touchy-feely? What would you say about that?
Well, I go back to the point that I mentioned earlier about communication. Communication will go on anyway. So whilst you might on the face of it have a happy employee, go on and tweak your ear around the staff canteen and hear what they're now saying about you and your style of leadership. So there's no way that human being is going to fill a potential of what they're capable of because they're not on your side.
Exactly.
So people have to feel that they belong. It's one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you want people to self-actualize, to reach their potential, they need the belonging comes way before that.
No, I think that's exactly right. Well, I knew this would be an awesome conversation, and before I let you go, I'm going to ask you just one more question. What one thing have you now realized through all of the trials and tribulations and things that have worked and things that haven't worked that you now know that you wish you had known at the very outset?
Oh, you gave me no warning that you were going to ask me such a tough question. What do I wish I know now? Or what would I do differently?
Yes.
I would. Something I do now is a commitment to continuous improvement in terms
Yes.
of self-development.
Yeah.
And I saw Warren Buffett as recently as yesterday saying, what's the one thing we must do? Or he actually gave a couple of things. But one is he said, work harder. It's a Jim Rohn quote. Work harder on yourself than you do in your job. So in terms of self-development, and that's why it's great to be a member of the PSA, the Speakers Association.
Which is the Professional Speaking Association of Ireland, for those watching from America as well.
Yes, and to challenge yourself to communicate better, because we're communicating anyway. And if we both have a degree in sales, does it mean we can sell? No, it's the power of communication at the end of the day. So I would definitely have learnt the art and the power of effective communication. I've only really started to tap into that in the last 10 years, Eamonn. I would have done it in my, if I think it should be taught in schools.
It should, and it's unbelievably powerful. Well, look, Jerry, can I thank you so much? I really appreciate it. And can I thank you also for watching today? You've been listening to the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And until the next time, happy speaking.